Welcome everybody. We will now start our session. So this is a part of the series of webinars we will be conducting for the graduate and the undergraduate studies, the bachelor's and master's program in United States. And I'm very, very happy to have Dr. Donald C. Martin with us, who is the expert in the field. He was the admissions dean in Columbia University. He was the admissions dean in Booth School of Business. Now in the USNEWS ranking this year, the University of Chicago Booth School is #1, the management school in United States. And hearing from a person who has more than 32 years of experience into the guiding students across different fields, different continents, it is really a privilege for all the students who can get such a vast knowledge. And he has written a book, on the graduate study. If anybody wants it, we will freely ship that book also, where he has put it is a practical exposure. What are the things which is expected to be done? Today's session, we are just starting with the introduction part of it, and then we will be going in much more detailed part of it, how the essays to be written, how the applications process completely, interviews part of it. So each and every admission process, the scholarships, everything, how it has to be taken in a post-graduation. That is so you can see the profile of doctor. He is evaluated for more than 125,000 students and more since 1980 2008. And since 2008, he has been working as an independent consultant and is guiding students across 50 countries. A lot of articles you can see in the USNEWS World Report magazine. And he's been the speaking tour continuously, talking on to different universities and the colleges worldwide. He travels it. So I welcome Dr. Donald C. Martin and request him to start today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dioris, and hello, everyone. I am absolutely delighted, truly delighted to have this opportunity to spend this hour with you. Thank you for taking time to join us today. And it is just a pleasure for me to work with Dr. Dioris and the 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐜 Academy. I've had that privilege for almost 10 years now. We met through a webinar, interestingly enough. I was doing a webinar for the International Institute of Education. Dr. Dioris was a participant, and I'm so thankful that he was there that day, because that ended up allowing us to have this opportunity to work together all these years. And I've had the privilege of helping with several students from 𝐂𝐡𝐞 who have gone on to pursue successful graduate study in the United States. So I'm delighted to be here and to begin this series of 6 or 7 webinars that we're going to do specifically devoted to the graduate school process, the process of earning a master's. And in some cases, some of you listening here might be thinking about a doctoral program, a PhD, an EDD, something along that line. We'll be talking about these things as we go through these series of webinars. But as Dr. Dioris said, today is more or less an introduction. This is not going to touch on specific areas too much, such as transcripts, test scores, interviews, essays, recommendation letters, your resume or your CV. We will cover all of that in depth as we go through this series in the next few months. But for today, I just wanted to provide a little bit of information to you about the overall process of studying at the graduate level in the United States and pursuing that goal. So Dr. Dioris has been kind enough to share with you about my background. I love what I do. I've never left the field of admissions and student services, financial aid. This has been my entire career, and it's been incredible. And so with that now, I'd like to share with you what we're going to talk about today very quickly. And you can just see these here. We're going to talk about some myths that many have about graduate study in the US. We're going to talk about the biggest mistake prospective students, whether this is at the undergraduate or the graduate level. This is a common, consistent mistake that most students make. Many, and I want to really talk about that with you today. We want to talk about the importance of planning ahead, some ways to get noticed, or positively or negatively. There are ways you can be noticed in either one of those, and you don't want to have the negative ones. Oftentimes, these are not intentional, but they happen, and it can make a difference in the outcome of your application. Then I'm going to talk briefly. I'm not going to talk today as much about specifics on essays and recommendations. I do want to talk about academics and test scores. That's something I will focus on just a little bit more today. And finally, responding if you happen to be waitlisted or denied. I'm often asked questions about this, and there's some very bad misinformation out there about what that means for a student if you are not automatically admitted, but rather waitlisted or denied. Many students believe that's the end, it's over. And that is not true, I'm happy to tell you. So we're going to close with a little bit of information about that. And then we're going to have some opportunity for you to ask questions. As Dr. Dioris knows, this is probably my favorite part of any webinar that I give, is the opportunity for participants to ask me questions. You can ask me anything. There's no bad question. There's no dumb question. If it's important to you, it's important to me. And I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I can toward the end of our presentation. But so that we can get there, we probably should start with the agenda. What do you think? Okay, so there are three major myths about graduate study in the United States. The first one, the biggest one, really, is my academic record is not good enough. Many students are concerned that if they did not have, now in the United States, as you may know, for undergraduate transcripts, there is a grading system that is based on a scale of 4.0, which means that's the top. If you have a 4.0 GPA at a university in the United States or a college, that means you got straight A's. You had a perfect academic record. Many applicants are concerned that if they don't have a 4.0 or perhaps a 3.8, maybe they have a 3.2 GPA. Maybe they have a 3.0 or even below a 3.0 in some cases. And they make an assumption that if that is the case, they are not good enough. They're not going to get in. We will talk about this later in my presentation today when we talk about academics. But in all honesty, as an individual who's been in this field, I was in full-time admissions dean positions for 28 years. So I'm telling you, as someone who's been in charge of this process and evaluated thousands of applications, it is not true that you have to have a 3.7, 4.0, otherwise you won't be considered. That is not true. So that's the biggest myth. The second is grad school is just like college. It's really no different in the United States. Well, there are some similarities. Obviously, a graduate education is an academic experience, and so is a college experience, an academic experience. So in that way, yes, they are similar. But in terms of the makeup of the curriculum and the types of students and the class sizes, there are some very big differences. For instance, most graduate students, and this would be the case not just in the United States, but if you studied in India, if you studied in Europe, if you studied somewhere else in Asia, most graduate students are now moving from a more general educational program. Yes, they may have had a major in their undergraduate experience, but they also most likely for at least 1 or 2 years took quite a few general courses in other fields that were not directly related to their major. In graduate school, you are focusing on one particular subject area. Let's say it's biology, computer science, engineering, psychology, business, law, medicine, whatever it is. You are now much more focused on a particular subject area and field that you have most likely selected that is going to lead you to your chosen career, your chosen profession. So it's much more focused at the graduate level. The requirements for your academic program are a little tougher. It's a little harder. It's not impossible by any means. You can do graduate school work. If I can do it, you can do it. But it is tougher. There's a level of expectation now. You're no longer in college, you are in graduate school, and there's an expectation that the workload is going to be heavier. And that's what it will be. The class size is much smaller. Whereas in college, you might have been admitted with an incoming class of 1,000 students. It's very rare that a graduate school incoming class would be anywhere near that size. A graduate school incoming class could be 30 students, 50 students, 200 students, but certainly not these larger numbers that often comprise the incoming class for an undergraduate student. And lastly, whereas at the collegiate level, there's quite a bit of emphasis placed on extracurricular activities, volunteer work, doing things outside of your program. There's a little less emphasis on that once you get to graduate school. The focus is more specifically that academic program and doing as well as you can, because how well you do academically at the master's level can affect your future educational plans if you would want to pursue a second master's or a doctoral program or get a job. The better you do academically, the better those chances will be. So there are some differences. Yes, you're pursuing academic study, but there are differences between the two. The third and final myth that I hear quite often is that there's a belief that colleges and universities in the United States just have lots of money to provide graduate students for scholarships. That if you get admitted, some have this perception that, oh, well, then they're going to pay for everything. And at the doctoral level, that's true. Most likely, if you are admitted as a PhD student in the United States, you will be fully funded, most likely, but not so at the master's level. At the master's level, there could be some scholarship help, but most of the time, 90 to 95% of the time, students are going to be responsible for part of their financial outlay to pursue their master's degree. So here, these are three very important aspects for you to consider now as you think about possibly coming to the United States and pursuing graduate study. Your grades do not have to be a 4.0. There's a few nuances, a few differences between the graduate school experience and the undergraduate experience in the US. And if you're a master's student, no, you will most likely not be fully funded. You will have to help to pay for your graduate education. Now, let's move to my next topic. Dr. Dioris is probably tired of hearing this because I talk about it in just about every webinar I do, but that's because it's so important to me. If I were to ask you today, and there are several good answers for this question, there isn't just only one answer, but the word I'm going to focus on here is, of the mistakes that you think you could make as an applicant, What do you think? I'm going to give you just 10 seconds to think about this, and you'll probably come up with some very good answers. But what do you think is the biggest mistake that you could make as a prospective graduate student? Just think about that for just 10 seconds. So I think some of you have an answer in your mind. Let me share with you some of the, well, I want to be careful that I don't get ahead of myself. I'm going to talk to you about some big mistakes you can make when I get to that section of 7 ways you don't want to be noticed by the admissions committee. So I'll share some of them there. But for purposes of this question, the biggest mistake you can make as a prospective graduate student is not doing adequate research before you apply. Many prospective graduate students in the United States and outside of the United States seem to think that there are only a few options for most of the programs they're considering. Let's take business school for an example. Did you know there are over 800 accredited business schools in the United States? And there are probably 200 of that group that are phenomenal. Now, I didn't say 20, I said 200 that are excellent, that provide tremendous opportunities for their students while they're in the MBA program and after they leave. And this could be said of other graduate programs, any field, psychology, biology, computer science, engineering, whatever it may be, hundreds of excellent programs. But if I were to ask you today, could you name 25 business schools in the United States? Most people in the United States and outside can't do that. They only focus on 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 that they know about, that they might have heard about. Now, word of mouth is okay to get some information, but it's not the best way to get some information. And if you don't take the time well before you apply to do some good research, you could end up missing out on a phenomenal option. One of the things I've had the privilege of helping Dr. Dioris to do is to locate programs for students who are working with the Astute Academy. I do research for those students and I find programs. And do you know, sometimes when I do this, most of the time, do you know how many programs I might send to Dr. Dioris to share with those students? It could be 40, it could be 50, in that range, not just 5. And there's a reason for that, is because there's so many that are wonderful. So as you do your research, please don't start out with 5 options. Moving to the next slide. This is about finding the best match for who? For you. It's about finding that place, that institution that will work for you. So, in my opinion, you want to start out with at least 10 to 15 options that you would like to really take a look at. And then create what I call your graduate school spreadsheet. Create an actual spreadsheet and list those options. My suggestion, list them in alphabetical order. Do not rank order them yet. Wait to do that until your perception about the institutions you're thinking about should come after you've done this research, not before you start out. So put them in alphabetical order and then make a list of things on the other side of that spreadsheet that you would like to look at. Is it location? Is it how much scholarship money is available to me? What is the class size? Do you know anything about the faculty? Have you taken at least a virtual tour of the campus so you know a bit about where it's located, what it looks like? Most of all, have you reached out to current students and recent graduates to ask them about their experience? I would think everyone, whether you live in the United States or not, everyone who's thinking about spending this amount of time and money, we know that going to graduate school is a commitment. There's a lot of work. It takes time. There's so much that is involved. And you want to be sure that you're ready for that commitment based on what you've learned about these options. So talking with current students, recent graduates, as I said in point number 3 here, find out as much as you can about each of your options. Fill in all those pieces of information, and then maybe you choose your 5, 7, or 9, or however many programs you're actually going to apply to. But spread the net wide. As I said, don't just rely on word of mouth or rankings. You can use them, but that shouldn't be your only means of finding out information. Make sure you're prepared for standardized tests. I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes. This is an important part. Now, I will say it appears that in many instances in the United States, standardized tests are being made optional, or they're being waived entirely. This seems to be a growing trend, but we're not at the point yet where every institution is doing that. There are still many that do require a standardized test, so you need to check that out. Make sure you have good recommenders. Oh my gosh, we'll talk about this in a few moments. This is so important. And of course, make sure you're planning ahead enough so that you will meet the application deadlines that are in front of you, that you don't wait so long that you're trying to cram all this work to get your applications ready 2 weeks ahead of time. That's going to cause you to make mistakes. It's going to cause you to rush. You're going to feel stressed. You're going to feel pressured. You want to allow plenty of time so that you can move along in a more organized and systematic manner so that you will meet your application deadlines. Yes, there'll be some stress. I don't know of too many applicants who don't feel some level of stress at some point, but certainly not to the degree if you wait too long and you don't allow yourself enough time. Now, what are some ways to be positively noticed as an applicant? I'm going to move through these pretty quickly. Our time is getting away from us, and I want to answer questions. Of course, please follow directions. If you cannot follow directions as an applicant, what is that going to say about your ability to follow directions once you're there? If whatever they ask you to do, do it. And if you don't understand something, you can reach out and ask. But if they give you a direction of 2 letters of recommendation, don't send 5. If they give you a word limit for an essay of 500 words, don't provide one with 1,000 words. I can't understand why so many applicants don't follow directions, but many of them don't, and that will hurt you. Number 2, here's where I want to just say this about recommenders. Do you know good recommendation letters can make or break an application? I'm going to do a whole session on this in our series as we move along. But for today, let me just say the best recommender is someone who knows you in 2 ways, long enough and well enough to really complete that recommendation letter. When they're asked to talk about your strengths, they can not only talk about them, but they can provide examples about them. If they're asked for a weakness, no applicant is perfect. Many applicants think, or recommenders think, when they're asked, can you tell us something this applicant needs to work on, that they're not supposed to give that answer. Yes, they are. That will hurt you. If the recommender says, Don Martin is just, he's perfect. He's wonderful in every way. That's not true of any of us. So your recommenders need to know you long enough and well enough to really do a good job on that letter. 3, you can be reasonably creative in the essay, especially in the essay portion of the application. Some applicants will tell a story. Some may be a little humorous in a particular area. That's okay, but don't go overboard. Now, this is an example of going overboard. One applicant sent flowers to me when they were applying. They sent me 6 red roses. And I thought, well, maybe if they'd have sent me 12, I would admit them. No, I'm totally teasing. But that was a little over the top. Another person sent me a little mirror in a box. When I opened it, it said, here's hoping I'll be looking back at you in the fall. Now that's creative, but this was for business school. It was like, what is going on here? So you can be creative, but don't go overboard. 4th, smile. Perhaps you'll do an interview. Perhaps you'll be part of a webinar or a Zoom call or a meeting with a current student or a recent grad or a faculty member. Whatever. Even if they can't see you, they've done studies on this. When you smile, you sound a little more upbeat. You sound a little more energetic. You sound a little more enthusiastic. So by all means, just smile. If you need to practice, practice. But by all means, smile. Okay? Number 5, ask good questions. What's a good question? A good question is one where the answer is not already provided somewhere on the website or in a catalog or in a session you attended. If you're asking questions that are already answered, that the best questions are, let me give you an example of a great question. An excellent question would be something like this. I read on your website that you offer an overseas exchange program in Belgium, in Europe. I've spoken with a few students about it. I've spoken with the program director, but I still have a few more questions. That's a great question. That shows them you did some homework. You found out what you could, but you want to know more. Beautiful, beautiful. So that's a good one. Next, keep your cool no matter what happens. Oh, sometimes admissions representatives make mistakes. When you send your online application in, it still gets printed out, most likely, and placed in a file folder. Well, sometimes someone may make a mistake and accidentally place a document of yours in somebody else's application folder. If they're processing tens of thousands of pieces of paper, this can happen. And you get a message from the admissions office that says, we don't have this document, and you know you sent it. That is not the time to get angry and start yelling. And I had students, it was amazing. They would almost talk so loud, I had to pull the phone away from my ear. They would say, your staff is so dumb. What's wrong with you? Do you think that made a positive impression? Absolutely not. As opposed to, of course, you might be disappointed, but what do you say? Oh, thank you so much for letting me know that. I'll get right on that. I'll get that. I thought I sent it, but I will send it again. You don't miss a beat. And that reaction, they're not trying to test you. They're not trying to play games with you. They're trying to help you to complete your application. So thank them and then do what you need to do to get it completed. Okay, number 7, it's never a bad thing to communicate your strong interest in a program. If you really, now, you don't do this with every option if you're going to be honest, but let's say that after all the research you've done, one of these options is just so far ahead of all the others. It is your number one choice. You've done all your homework. You believe this is the best match for you. Tell them that. Tell them that you did research. Tell them that you have been really looking at this institution. You've spoken with students. Excuse me. You're so excited about the program after all the research you've done, and you want them to know that. That's very impressive. So let them know. I really hope to have the opportunity to join the program. All right. Now, how do you not want to be noticed? Well, first of all, you don't want to be dishonest. Many applicants, over the years, when I first started out as an admissions dean, and I learned that someone had cheated on their application in some way, I have to apologize. I feel badly about this, but I kind of thought they were a bad person. I would think there was something wrong with them. And over the years, I changed that view. I don't believe any applicant is a bad applicant, but I do believe there are applicants out there who are a little afraid that their credentials are not going to be good enough, competitive enough. And so they are tempted to want to try to embellish their credentials, try to say things about themselves that really aren't true. And admissions offices may not always catch that, but 9 times out of 10, they're going to. And when they do, what happens? You're automatically denied and they will never let you apply again. It's over. You cannot do it again. So please, could you be tempted to be dishonest? Of course, we're all human. We all are tempted. But my suggestion, you don't have to be, just be yourself. Just let yourself shine through. Second, too much contact. You do not want to be reaching out to the admissions office all the time. That becomes a bit bothersome. It makes it look like you can't function on your own. If you have specific questions, you've tried, you can't answer them, of course we would, and by the nature of the question, it would be clear that you really do need help with that. So don't, it's not that you can't reach out. We used to have applicants who'd reach out every week. I'm just checking in to say that I really like your school. Well, that's too much, way too much. So don't overdo it. Number three, the opposite of what I said about getting positively noticed. If you don't follow directions, you're going to get negatively noticed, and the response will be according to that. Here's another one, rude or arrogant behavior. Now, here's something else I've kind of adjusted my thinking over the years. Many times applicants are told, oh, you need to be confident. You need to show that you believe you can do it, and you need to put forth your best strengths. And I think that sometimes that's a disservice to applicants, because there is a big difference, ladies and gentlemen, between confidence and arrogance. If I started out my webinar today with you and I had said, I have worked for 42 years in this field and I am an expert. If I had talked like that, how would you feel toward me? I think that would turn you off, and rightfully so. So where you want to do the bragging in your application is through your recommenders, not through yourself. However, let's say in an interview, you're asked what you think your strengths are. There are ways of saying that. This is what I often help my applicants to do, is to speak in a way that is confident, but not conceited or arrogant. That will hurt you tremendously. Number five, sending information that you really didn't look closely at or went to the wrong place. I used to get it when I worked at Chicago Booth as Dean of Admissions. I would get an essay from a student that would say, and that is why the Stanford School of Business is my #1 choice. I hope I don't want to go anywhere else. Do you know what my action was? Okay, you're denied. Clearly you don't want to be here. So please, here again, this is what happens if you rush. You want to take time to make sure you send the right information to the right schools, and that you send the most up-to-date draft of an essay or a resume or whatever you're including. You make sure it's the up-to-date one, not the first one you started out with, not your draft. Number six, here again, asking. Now, let me give you an example of 2 questions you never want to ask an admissions office, ever, ever, ever. They are, number one, what are your application deadlines? I promise you, I was asked this all the time, and we had them printed everywhere in our materials, on the website, in chat rooms, everywhere. And somebody would say, I thought, oh my word, we don't want to bring that person in. They can't even just find out for themselves when our deadlines are. The second question was worse than the first. Do you offer financial aid? I felt like saying, no, we don't offer anything. Of course, we do offer financial aid, not full ride packages, not full tuition most of the time, but every institution offers financial aid. So those are 2 questions that are off limits. Do not ask questions you can find out the answers for yourself, okay? And lastly, leaving something unaddressed in your application or making excuses when you address it. Let's say you did have a lower GPA. Let's say you have a 3.2 and you don't say anything about that. You do need to address it. But what you don't do is say, oh, I've had such a hard life and everything. No, but if there's been a reason that caused your grades to suffer, you don't have to go into great detail. Some students lost a loved one. Their parent passed away while they were in college. They had an accident, a car accident, or they fell, or they were injured or something. They had a sudden financial crisis in their family. Something happened, and it does affect us. We're emotional human beings. So if you have, excuse me, if you have a situation like that, Of course, you do address it, you explain it, but you don't make excuses for it. All right, our time is coming to a close. A quick word about academics here. And by the way, I hope I'm going to get questions when this presentation comes to a close. If you have a question and you haven't asked it yet, please type it in the Q&A section here on the webinar. Please, 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 any questions. I love questions. So I hope I'm going to have lots. So first of all, here again, if your academic record is not as good, you explain that, but you don't make excuses. Please do not do that. Secondly, as I said, you need to spend some time preparing for whether you have to take a standardized test or a test of English, either one or both. Make sure you spend some time preparing so that you will do a good job on this test. But also, do not take it, in my opinion, more than 3 times. Do not keep taking it over and over and over again. The strong likelihood is that your scores are not going to change that much. They're just not going to. They might fluctuate a little bit, but after the 3rd or at the most the 4th time, then if you don't have the best score that you hope for, you could address that again in the optional question that comes with most applications. That's where I help most of my students to address that. And I'm sure Dr. Dioris and his team do the same. They will help you to address what needs to be addressed in that regard. Okay, now, before we get to some final slides here, if you are placed on a waiting list or you would be denied, I want to share a couple of quick thoughts with you. First of all, this is not personal. Honestly, it is not personal. Perhaps you don't know how this works. Most people don't. As an admissions dean, I had absolutely no ability to determine how many students would be admitted each year, what the class profile would look like. That was not up to me. That was given to me by the dean or the vice president, whether it was at Columbia, University of Chicago, Northwestern. I would meet with my dean or my vice president every fall, let's say in August or September, and they would say, Don, next fall, we want you to bring in this number of students, and this is what we want the class to look like. And then they would say, we want this many men and this many women, this many minority, this many majority, this many US citizens, this many international students. And then they would say, and we want folks with these kinds of backgrounds. So I was given that instruction. And as you probably know, at a school like Columbia or Chicago Booth or Northwestern, typically, whatever the program, there are far more applications than there are available seats in the class, far more. At Chicago Booth, for instance, I was usually instructed to bring in between 485 and 505 students, somewhere in that range, each year, the incoming MBA class. We might have 4,000 to 5,000 applications, 4,000 to 5,000 for that number of students. Many, 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 many outstanding applicants we could not admit. We denied some, we placed some on the waiting list. So this is not a personal assessment of your ability to do graduate work. It is an indication that we simply don't have room for everyone. So if you are waitlisted, for both of these, request feedback. And if you're given a chance to respond, especially if you're waitlisted and they ask you for some additional information, provide it as soon as you can. Please, many applicants think if they're on the wait list, they're going to be denied. It's the exact opposite. If you're on the waiting list, they want you there. They really want to admit you that year if they can. So don't assume that you're being one step from being denied. If they can't admit, consider reapplying. Did you know that the percentage of applicants who reapply and get in goes up, not down. Once again, applicants believe that if they were denied the first time, they're automatically going to be denied again if they apply. Absolutely not true. The opposite occurred. When I worked at Columbia, if we could not admit someone the first time they applied and they waited a year, they enhanced even more their application credentials and they reapplied, they almost always got in. We brought them in. They weren't denied again. So please do not assume anything if you don't get that initial, yes, you've been admitted. Of course, that's what we all want. But we don't all get that. And I will share with you, I myself, when I applied to Northwestern for my PhD, I did not get in the first year, but I got in the second year. And do you know what happened? They didn't only admit me, they knocked off my whole first year of coursework. They told me that because they were able to admit this time and because I had a 2-year master's and some other things, they waived my whole first year of coursework. And the year before, they had told me they couldn't admit. So this is, I'm telling you from personal experience, it happens. Don't take this personally. Don't assume that all is lost if you are not admitted. Okay. I usually speak for about 40 minutes, and it is now in where I am here in Chicago. I've been speaking for 40 minutes, and of course, there in India as well. I am now ready to take questions. Whatever you want to ask me, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Dr. Diores in just a moment. But let me just say, it has been a pleasure, a great pleasure to meet and speak with all of you. It looks like we have a good turnout here today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you'll stay on now. We're not over yet, so I can answer some questions. With that, Dr. Diores, I will turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really excellent information. And I think the students should appreciate this is what is you will never find anywhere on the websites or anywhere. This has come with years of experience in handling the students. And this is the knowledge what Dr. Donald Martin has really got. And really, thank you very much for sharing such a great insight. We will be going every part of it in detail in the subsequent webinars. We are going to pick up each and every point, and we'll be going in far more detailed part of it. But today it was very, very essential that we give the brief of it. Now you start typing a questions on the question answer tab. I will take one by one question, and I'll request Dr. Donald Martin to answer. The first question, how can we get opportunity in USA companies? I think he's looking for the job prospects as regards to in US companies.
That's an excellent question. And the answer would be that at the graduate level, well, even in college, but certainly at the master's level, there are employers that come to visit campuses and actually interview students, and you can sign up to do that if you wish. And keep in mind that just as graduate school admissions committees are looking for a diverse applicant pool to bring a diverse student body to bring in, so many employers love to hire individuals from outside the United States. This is absolutely not uncommon. So when you arrive at the institution that you would be attending and knowing that you wish to remain in the United States for a possible short-term period of time or longer term, then what you want to do is meet with the career advising office, meet with the career services staff, let them know of your interests, and begin to take advantage of the information they provide. They will be reaching out to you throughout the program with opportunities to attend workshops on resume writing, interviewing, reaching out to potential employers. How do you go about doing that? Take advantage of that. These folks are very well trained. And in the schools where I worked, our placement rate was very high. Whether our student, and at Chicago Booth, we had 100 to 150 students from outside the United States. It didn't matter. They all got hired too. So that would be my advice. That's a great question.
Yeah, thank you very much. The second
welcome.
question, what is the good GRE score for the master's program in mechanical engineering?
For a master's program in mechanical engineering, I would suggest that you would want at least a 158 to 160 on the verbal section of the test and above 160 on the quantitative part of the test. Ideally, that is what you would be shooting for. Good question.
Another question, what should be the approach of a student with a non-STEM course to excel and secure the optional practical training? What should be the approach of a student with a non-STEM course? So maybe a law or the management to excel and secure OPT, optional practical training.
I'm honestly not sure I'm understanding this completely, Tushar. I don't know if you have any insights there. In terms of practical training, if this person is asking if they're a non-STEM graduate student in a field, like you said, of law or business or something, and they would be wanting to be exposed to more practical training as they go through the program. For professional degree programs, there is almost always an option for internship or practical work experience while you're going through the program. That's built into a 2-year MBA or 3-year law degree. And that opportunity will be readily made known to you during the orientation program when you first start your program of study. Now, if this question is beyond law or business and they want to speak with you or I, Dr. Dioris, on the side, we could possibly do something like that.
Yeah. So basically the optional practical training is something like a job. So as the first question, when Dr. Donald Martin was speaking about the best opportunities in US companies, that will apply to the optional practical training. So whatever you are learned, you are now doing the job and you are seeing the practical side of implementation of that, and you are learning on the side jobs part of it. Whether the STEM or non-STEM does not matter actually in this part of it. Only thing, non-STEM will have the 1 year of OPT and the STEM program will have 3 years OPT. That is the only difference, but the approach remains the same, whether it is a STEM or non-STEM program. That's what is, I think, the questions.
Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you.
Can you suggest some colleges for pursuing MS in cybersecurity?
I'm going to ask you to take that up with Dr. Dioris maybe after the webinar. The answer is yes. Typically, students who work with Dr. Dioris, then he refers them to me, and I can provide some options in any field that they are interested in.
Yeah, so initially, if you have joined the webinar at early, Dr. Donald Martin has said the research is something going to be the most critical part and which is the most missing part also. Students don't do the research, just run after the rankings part and other things. So it is a very complex thing. Selection of the university is not a very, very easy task. It requires many parameters, many things. There are lots of research to match. So it is understanding of your career objective is very prominent. So when I speak with the students, definitely I understand what is their long-term career goal, what is short-term they are looking, what are their strengths, weaknesses are there. And then we prepare a proper Excel sheet, and Dr. Donald Martin shortlists the universities, and he gives me 40, 50 sometimes, which are great universities. And again, we need to really shortlist out of that based on the career objectives. It's a process. It cannot be just good or bad. Today, the Stanford is a great university, MIT, Harvard, Columbia, all are great universities, but not everybody will get admissions in these universities. You get admission based on your profile, not based on your desire. Your desire maybe to go to MIT doesn't mean you will get an admission into the MIT. please understand the shortlisting of universities is one of the most complex part of it. And I'm really happy and privileged that Dr. Donald Martin is doing excellent job. And I told in the last meeting also, we have 100% success ratio in whatever universities is selecting. We are getting large number of 5, 6, 7, or sometimes 10 admits, which is, and then you have so much of choice to really make. And that is why it is very critical. So we can take one-to-one, Neha, and we'll look. Yeah. Next question. If acquiring scholarship is very difficult, what would be the best way to balance the finances?
That's a great question. And again, I don't know of too many graduate school students who are able to afford to pay themselves for their entire education. That's just not possible. So there are scholarship options, but if you are not offered a scholarship, there would be some loan options perhaps available to you. And if you are, most financial aid packages might include some scholarship money and some loan money from the university in the United States. If between those two, you still do not have what you need, then there would be a need for you to determine if you have some personal resources of your own or your family to help in this case. Now, let me also mention there's one other possibility. Many graduate students, in addition to scholarships or loans, may be offered a work position at the university as a research assistant, a teaching assistant, or sometimes universities will hire graduate students to work in the admissions office or the accounting office or the development office. There are some opportunities to work, and by doing that, you end up receiving tuition reduction or tuition remission. This is what I did, actually. I ended up working the second year of my master's program right at the school at Northwestern. After my 2 years of coursework, I worked there full time, and the rest of my bill was paid. So there are several different options, but most likely, most students at the graduate level, at the master's level, excuse me, do need to be ready to supply some of their own funds in order to attend graduate school in the States or abroad.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So there are a lot of opportunities are there. So many need-based scholarships are also available, but definitely you need to really do the homework very well. Another question, any graduates other than engineering, medical, can take admission in USA, and what about the rural and economically weaker students other than engineering he's talking about? So I think residency is a free program. So medical PG is a free in United States. Yeah, Donald, yes.
Yeah. No, that's what you took that. That's what I would say. Yes, it's you can do it. Now, I believe that the tail end of that question was something about if you're economically disadvantaged,
yes,
in some way. I'm so glad this person asked that. I would like to say one thing about that. Admissions decisions are never made based on someone's economic situation. That is not part of the evaluation process. Every applicant is evaluated based on the aspects and parts of the application they're asked to submit. Once admission decisions are made, then consideration begins on, all right, who needs financial aid? How do we want to award it? What is the situation? But your economic situation will never, ever be a deterrent from you being admitted if, in fact, that's the decision of the admissions committee.
Another question, what is the best between the GMAT and the GRE? Which is more preferred? And whether, yeah.
Well, the GMAT is only required typically for business school or grad programs in finance, maybe economics, they might accept a GMAT score. Other than that, the GRE is now accepted for any program, including business and finance and economics. It is most business schools, most economics programs, finance programs are equally accepting the GRE and the GMAT. So in some ways, it may be that this answer would be, which test did you do the best on if you try taking both? The only real difference between the GMAT and in fact, you may not know this, but the GRE and the GMAT were prepared by the same organization here in the United States, the Educational Testing Service. Now, the Educational Testing Service sold the GMAT many years ago to an organization called the Graduate Management Admissions Organization. So that is no longer part of ETS, but initially they created the GRE and the GMAT. And the difference is the GMAT is, in terms of the reading comprehension and some of the quantitative aspects of the test, it's more geared to a business setting. But other than that, the quantitative and verbal sections are not all that different. So some folks seem to do better on a GRE, some do better on a GMAT. In terms of what admissions offices prefer, there's no difference anymore. Where they'll accept both, they treat them equally in the evaluation process. Good question.
Yeah, very, very, very important. And because there is a lot of confusion, the GMAT is only for the management. Now it is the
Right.
GRE, even Harvard Business School accept the GRE for management.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So another question, which intake is better, spring or fall? I have heard a lot of myths about it. I have completed my bachelor's in mechanical engineering. So whether spring or fall?
That would depend on if there is an intake in spring and there's one in the fall. That means, first and foremost, that the university is ready to welcome new students both times in both terms, and that the coursework and the program requirements can start being met immediately once you get there. Now, typically, there is a much larger number of incoming students that start in the fall. There's a much smaller number in the spring, but it's not like there aren't any that are doing this. This ends up being more an issue about your own planning, your own situation, what might work best for you. And in a very practical way, I would say this, depending on where you would be enrolling if you start in a spring intake. As you know, in the United States, during the months of December, January, February, we have winter. I live in Chicago. It's very cold in Chicago in the wintertime, very windy. So depending if that would ever be an issue for you, then you might want to start in the fall. But in terms of program availability, curriculum, faculty, financial aid, student services, career services, if they have a spring intake, all of that will be available to you just as it would be in the fall. It becomes a personal decision of yours.
In the fall, and this is, as you have mentioned, it is myths. It is a myth. And companies do hire throughout the year.
Absolutely.
If you are a good university, if you are really a studious students and you concentrate, you know what is your goal, you know what career you want to make it, the intake does not matter. Definitely from the Indian perspective, because we have the once a year system, and most of our examinations happen in the month of May or June. And that is why most of the Indian students apply into the fall intake. But spring is equally good. It's only 4 months later, because normally you starts in August and this starts first week. If you are not prepared at that time, it is very well you can postpone by 4 months and go to the spring. There is no question, no negative things as regards So you are really, it's open for the student's choice.
That's
Another
exactly
student,
right.
yeah. Give me some advice in critical situation in student faces any problems. Some advice in critical situation in student faces any problems. I have not understood, but
Well,
maybe he
let
faces
me,
some critical problems during the study.
yeah, by the way, in my book, which Dr. Dioris has graciously offered to you, all of you free of charge, I hope you'll take advantage of that. In the third chapter of my book, actually, the third chapter is devoted to 15 tips on how to succeed once you have arrived in your graduate program. And these tips have to do with various issues that could come up while you're in your studies and what you can do about them. But let me just say in general, whether it's academic, financial, or personal, institutions are equipped to speak with. Now, they're not going to intrude. They're not going to try and pressure you. But if you believe you need help in one of those areas, by all means, they are ready to offer help. You will most likely have an academic advisor assigned to you so that if you have an issue, you could go and speak with that person. There, you can always go to the financial aid office and talk with someone there. The career services office is always available every day of the week. They're there to answer questions about your career search, and the student development office has individuals trained if you are experiencing some emotional challenges, which many students do. That's not a bad thing. That doesn't make you weak. It just means you're going, and they can refer you for resources to help. So there's ways of helping whatever the challenge may be. And if you happen to get a copy of the book, you can read that third chapter, which gives you 15 specific tips on how to make your graduate experience the best that it can be.
US universities are very well equipped to handle any problems, even psychological problems. There are great counselors who are there, and they will really help you in whatever situations we are there. The police, government, and Madad is our Ministry of External Affairs portal. You should download that application. The Ministry of External Affairs is our embassy in United States is our first guardian, and their response time is just 10 minutes. You have any query, you send them, and I have seen the students getting, even the US has the emergency number 911. If you have a problem, you call 911 and you will get immediately response from them, and you will get all types of support. So it's a very, very safe environment. The university, our Ministry of External Affairs, the police department, all are together, will help you into the situation. Should not be worrying about it. Now, what if there is an education gap in bachelor's and eventually because of it, the CGPA, the GPA is low? So can we a good GRE and TOEFL score can help overcome it?
That's a great question. My first answer is yes. A strong GRE and TOEFL score always helps. Here, that will absolutely help. And if you have a gap in your undergraduate experience, the time it took you to finish or whatever, that's something, again, you would want to explain in the optional essay question most graduate school applications offer you. There could be something that caused you to have to stop or change maybe someone you transferred from one program to another. This happens quite often. Now, keep in mind, let's say that the first 2 years of your undergraduate experience, your GPA was not as strong, and then you had a break, you had a gap, and you finished, and your GPA, while your overall GPA might not be still as high, those last 2 years or that last year, you did extremely well. And then you have a strong GRE or GMAT score combined with a strong TOEFL or IELTS score. Yes, that all helps. That will all, as I said at the beginning, having a lower GPA in and of itself is not the end of the world. as long as you're able to explain some things and demonstrate that you do have the ability to handle the academic work.
The questions. I'm not seeing any new question. If anybody has got a question, please do answer. Just I want to tell all the students, this is the start of the webinar series with Dr. Donald Martin. We will be having the series. We will be going every more details. So in the coming month, in the June, from I think first week of June, we will be having the for undergraduate and the graduate students. Both the students will be going more and more detail how we should be handling the application process, letter of recommendations and all. And we request you to keep us sending the feedback and questions also, and so that we can take it forward. Now we are also will send you the complete link of whatever webinars we'll be proposing in the future, so that you know the dates well in advance, so you can join on the specific dates and time. We have created a single link, so every time you need not again register. You can just on the day and the time. So you will be getting complete schedule with the dates and everything. So those who are already joined, we have your email IDs and all. Please look at the email part of it. Any more questions, please do type. So there is one question. What is the job opportunities in MS in aerospace engineering in United States?
I can give you very good news. Those jobs are very plentiful, and we are looking for individuals in aerospace engineering in the United States. That is definitely something where you're not going to have trouble. Now, you may not get hired every place you interview, but there will be recruiters coming to your campus to meet with you. That much I can guarantee. That is a very, very, very highly regarded and highly recruited for field in the US. And I might add outside of the United States, but certainly in the US.
So thank you very much. I think that we have finished with the questions. I hope this session was very, very informative, and you could get this information, as I said earlier, also you will never find in any of the websites and everything. It is the experience of Dr. Donald Martin working with the Columbia University, the Booth School of Business, Northwestern, and Wheaton College. It's a great, really, I'm really happy to be associated with Dr. Donald Martin, and he will be helping us with all the complete processes for the admission into the graduate, the post-graduation admissions. So thank you very much again, Donald Martin, and thanks all the students who joined it in large numbers. Please do circulate this link to all other students, so then next, when we go into the detailed session, your other students can also join. Thank you very much.